International Accounting Standard 17 is a flawed accounting standard. I don't want you to lead me astray. That's all right. So ISA 17 is a flawed accounting standard because it has a subjective classification process which leads to similar items being dealt with in radically different ways. It results in off-balance sheet finance for operating leases. It is in conflict with the framework. It's an unsatisfactory standard. It's out of date. So there is a new... In reality, the new standard's already out. In reality, the new standard already exists. But for the tense of your exam, that new standard is not yet an examinable document. So we must do the exam applying ISA 17, but we must be aware that that standard is out of date. So the proposals are to cease the classification process, to stop referring to finance leases and operating leases, to cease the classification process, to treat all leases in the same way. So you cease the classification process, you treat all leases in the same way, and effectively you apply the framework's definition of an asset and the framework's definition of a liability in deciding the accounting treatment. So the solution will be to cease the classification process. To cease the classification process. To treat all leases the same way. To recognize liabilities per the framework. To recognize assets per the framework. Or what is sometimes referred to as a right to use basis. Arguably, therefore, the financial statements will be more complete and more reliable, arguably. Lovely cup of tea, thank you very much. Now, this is an opportunity to play with some numbers, and this is an opportunity for us to turn to page 111 with the question of lift. Page 111 with the question of lift. company leases an asset for 3 years. We are paying 10,000, 10,000, and 10,000. So we're making 3 payments of 10,000. We cannot cancel the lease. You signed a 3-year agreement, and even if you break the asset or change your mind, even if you change your mind, you're still legally bound to make those 3 payments. The useful life of the asset is 10 years. A. What type of lease is it? Operator. Yeah. We have to ask that as our first question. Under ACCA 17, we are compelled to classify. We are compelled to judge. We are compelled to segregate leases into 2 camps, finance and operating. Now, in this particular case, there's a limited amount of information, but what we have is the asset with a life of 10 years. We are getting it for 3, so therefore this is classified as an operating lease, and as a result we are interested in a rental expense. As a result, we are interested in a rental expense. No trick this time. You pay 10, you pay 10, and you pay 10. So what will be the rental expense each year? 10. Explain how a lessee would currently account for the lease. International Accounting Standard 17 is the relevant standard. We classify leases between finance and operating based on whether or not substantially all the risk and rewards of ownership have passed. We have only leased this asset for 3 out of its 10-year life. On that basis, the risk and rewards are not passing, so it is an operating lease. So you would charge a rental expense of 10,000 per annum. Ugh. Push comes to shove, you could write all of that down, yeah, for 3 or 4 marks if it really came to it. So the incremental effect of entering into an operating lease is an expense and nothing on the balance sheet. That is the answer to part A, and I am happy with the answer to part A. It is, after all, relatively simple. What does ED stand for? Disposal. Okay. Right. Let's take this slowly. What's the definition of a liability? A present obligation arising from a past event, the settlement of which will result in an outflow of economic benefit. Right, hear me out. I've signed a lease. The signing of the lease is the past event. The signing of the lease creates a legal obligation to make a payment of 10, 10, and 10. The day I sign the lease is the day I create a liability of 30,000 per the framework. I say 30,000, I'll probably discount it, but I have an obligation to make 3 payments of 10. So that's the first thing that I want to write down. The liability is a present obligation. Arising from a past event. The settlement of which results in an outflow of economic benefits. A liability is a present obligation arising from a past event, the settlement of which results in an outflow of economic benefits. There is here a past event, being the signing of the lease. That creates an obligation. That creates three obligations. That creates three obligations to pay $10,000. Under the new proposal, we take the framework seriously. Under the new proposals is developed in accordance with the framework. So there's little to distinguish between what the framework would suggest and what the standard, the new standard says. Here we've got a past event. You've signed a contract. Signing of the contract is the past event. That creates a present obligation to make three payments of debt. I'll come back to that in a minute. What's a definition of an asset? It's a resource that you control. Yeah? It's a resource that you control as a result of a past event that's going to give you future economic benefits. Time out for a sec. The asset's got a life of 10 years. If you lease it for 10 years, then you have got substantially all the risk and reward of ownership, and under ISA 17, it's a finance lease, recognise the asset. Now, we're only leasing it for 3 years. So if we take ISA 17, there's no asset. I think that's wrong. For these 3 years, I've got the keys. For these 3 years, it's on my premises. I have the asset. I control the asset for these 3 years. I have the economic benefit from this asset for these 3 years. If it's a car, I choose when to drive it. I lock it up. I have the keys. I have access to those economic benefits. I'm in control of the asset. If it's a shop that you're leasing for 3 years, you decide when it opens, you decide when it closes, you have the keys, you have the economic benefits. You don't have substantially all the economic benefits, but you control it for that period of time. You have the right to use the asset. The right to use the asset. And on that basis, you should recognise an asset accordingly. So, there is here a past event that is the signing of the lease that creates three obligations. An asset is a resource that is controlled. An asset is a resource that is controlled by entity as a result of past events, and will give future economic benefit. And will give future economic benefit.